Welcome to this recap, guys.
In this world, the Baskerville family is known as the Berserker family due to the intense training and evaluation that their children undergo from a young age. The training begins when the children are able to take their first steps, and they are immediately put through a rigorous test of their stamina. They must run up a steep mountain and are not allowed to lie down or rest on their stomachs except for allocated times. As if this wasn't enough, when it's time for them to sleep, they are required to sleep alongside a monster corpse. This is to help them adjust to tough environments and become resilient in the face of danger. These extreme practices are what make the Baskerville family feared and respected throughout the land. After this period of grueling training, the children reach the age of 8, and the real test begins. The young hounds, as they are called, must undergo a deadly evaluation. This is the defining moment that has earned the Baskerville family its notorious reputation. Now, on the outskirts of the territory, there is a mountain known as the La Rouge-et-Lenoir Mountain. It is filled with monsters, and it is here that the young hounds gather to undergo their evaluation. The instructor of the Baskerville family, Shadow Dog Pavlov van Baskerville, stood before the young masters and explained the rules of the test. They needed to survive for a month in the area and hunt large and strong monsters. He went on to explain that the points for being successful in surviving were 10 points, and if the young masters survived without becoming disabled, it was 30 points. If they failed other young masters and survived, it was 50 points. If they defeated a monster and survived, it was 70 points. And if they fulfilled all the above conditions, they would receive 90 points. Pavlov also told the young masters that if they stole the badge that was given to them from someone else, additional points would be given. However, if they died, they would receive 0 points. He emphasized that there were no 100 points and reminded them of Sir Hugo's lesson that a swordsman dies the moment they become arrogant. The instructor also cautioned against leaving the designated area, as La Rouge-et-Lenoir Mountain was a restricted area with many undiscovered things. He recommended that the young masters move within the given space where the monsters had already been subjugated. He informed them that during the exam, shadow dogs would be hiding and grading them. As the young masters waited for the start of the practical exam, some of them noticed Victor and began discussing his past feats. Despite their comments, Victor remained composed and thought about the La Rouge-et-Lenoir Mountain, which he had visited before. Meanwhile, the triplets standing near Victor were visibly nervous, sweating with fear. Shadow Dog Pavlov addressed the young masters, wishing them good luck before the bell rang, signaling the start of the exam. As soon as the bell rang, all the young masters started running towards different parts of the mountain to occupy advantageous areas. One of the young masters had a plan and thought about going to a place he had seen in the last year's exam, hoping to gain an edge. The young master behind him thought he could not survive alone and decided to follow him, with the intention of taking it from him. Meanwhile, the triplets were arguing amongst themselves, each wanting to do things their own way and come out on top. Shadow Dog Pavlov observed as the exam began, knowing that it was important to keep casualties to a minimum. Although killing was not prohibited, it was discouraged, and any contestant who did kill would have points deducted. Pavlov and the other shadow dogs were determined to do their best to prevent any unnecessary deaths. One of the shadow dogs that was assigned to follow Victor was surprised to see him heading towards a restricted area. He wondered where Victor was going and if he was the rumored genius who had distinguished himself since childhood. The shadow dog was intrigued and looked forward to seeing the skills Victor would display. Victor approached a large tree and wondered if this was the right spot. He thought that the soft ground would be suitable for him to set up camp for a while. Victor then considered taking a break, which left the shadow dog following him confused. While other participants were busy fighting each other for points or facing monsters, Victor gathered wood and practiced with a wooden stick. Later on, he slept peacefully under the tree. The shadow dog who had been watching Victor grew impatient and started to question his actions. He wondered how long it had been since Victor had taken a break and observed that he spent most of his time digging holes, hunting for food, or collecting equipment. The shadow dog started to doubt the rumors about Victor's supposed genius, wondering if he was planning on hiding instead of actively participating in the exam. At last, the shadow dog decided to leave and find something interesting elsewhere. As soon as the shadow dog left, Victor's face lit up with a smile. He was happy that he could finally relax and thought to himself that camping outside reminded him of the old days. Victor recalled a conversation with his group mate about using cacao beans to make fish smell less fishy. He threw some bloody beans into the fire and remarked that the interfering shadow dog was finally gone and he had finished all his preparations. He wondered if he should start his hunt now. A few days later, Victor entered the restricted area and recognized it from his scouting days. As he was roaming around, He noticed a burning smell and burnt tree roots. He knew that the habitat of the monster he was looking for was around there. Suddenly, he spotted burning stool and realized that he had found it. There was only one monster around there that produced that kind of dropping, a hellhound. The hellhound stood in front of Vikir with flame erupting from its mouth. The hellhound was a dog from hell that brought horrific disasters to those who encountered it. It had a risk rating of B+ and was 3 meters in size. Its sulfuric flames that came out of its mouth and eyes were extremely gaseous and could trigger sparks. If it bit someone, they could not survive. The living things used as firewood would burn and not go out until they completely disappeared. Vikir knew that he was in trouble when he saw the towering figure of the lookout monster that swallowed the hellfires of the oil world, the hellhound. The beast was known to be one of the most dangerous monsters in the land, and Vikir had barely survived his encounter with one when he was just 18 years old in his past life. Now, as an 8-year-old, Vikir knew that it would be impossible for him to defeat the hellhound alone. But he remembered a way to take on the beast that even a child could manage. As the hellhound lunged towards him, Vikir quickly dodged to the side, remembering the first weakness of hellhounds. They could only move in straight lines. They found it difficult to suddenly change directions. Vikir quickly dropped some water on the ground, and as the hellhound charged towards him, he shouted out the second weakness of lookout monsters. They were unable to cross water. Because of the water Vikir dropped, the hellhound took a longer route to reach Vikir, giving him more time to dodge. Vikir knew that even a shallow depth of water could slow them down significantly, exposing the weakness common to all canine monsters, opening their mouth while running. Vikir found himself in another life-threatening situation as the bloodthirsty hellhound attacked him. But Vikir was prepared, and he threw a bloody bean into the monster's mouth. After landing, the hellhound suddenly started to whimper in pain and become unable to move. Vikir explained that chocolate was poison to canines, and with the bloody bean's power to make 100 liters of chocolate with just one bean, it was obvious what it would do to a canine monster like the hellhound. He drew his sword and aimed for the hellhound's weak spot where the ribs were not present, the kidney. With a swift and decisive strike, Vikir pierced the hellhound's kidney, killing it easily. As he absorbed the energy called XP or karma from the defeated monster, Vikir felt his body getting stronger. He swung his sword and felt it becoming lighter, knowing that he was catching up to where he was before his regression before he even reached the age of 15. Vikir couldn't help but wonder what kind of expression Hugo would make when he brought back a monster with a risk rating of B+ as an 8-year-old child. Vikir stood there, ready to take the head of the hellhound he had just defeated, feeling confident in his abilities. He knew he had already secured first place in the practical test, and was eager to claim his reward, something he never would have dreamed of in his past life. But his moment of triumph was short-lived as a group of hellhounds approached him, likely seeking revenge for their fallen comrade. Vikir remained calm and collected, already knowing the weaknesses of these creatures and how to defeat them. As the hellhounds drew nearer, Vikir took out his sword and prepared to take them on. He had plenty of bloody beans left and was ready to use them to his advantage. With a smirk on his face, he cut the dead hellhound's head and taunted the hellhounds, knowing they were no match for his skills and knowledge. He had already defeated one of their kind and was prepared to take them all down. The hellhound suddenly started whimpering, which immediately caught Vikir's attention. He couldn't believe that the fierce beasts were feeling scared of a mere 8-year-old's bloodthirst. Hellhounds would never submit to their prey even if they were to die. Vikir thought to himself, trying to figure out what could have caused the hellhounds to feel so uneasy. As Vikir turned around, he saw a monstrous creature with 3 heads standing before him. It was a Cerberus, the legendary 3-headed dog from Greek mythology. The creature was massive, measuring at least 7 meters in size, and Vikir knew that a Cerberus had a risk rating of A+. Vikir was bewildered as to what a Cerberus, which typically inhabited the 7th ridge of the La Rouge et La Noire mountain, was doing here. The Cerberus was known as the ultimate lookout monster, residing in a place where all the dead spirits were headed. Vikir noticed that the Cerberus was bleeding and had multiple arrows stuck in its body. He realized that someone might have been hunting it, and it had come all the way to this place being chased. This was his chance to kill an injured A+ rank monster, and he decided to attack the Cerberus. Despite the Cerberus being a powerful and dangerous creature, Vikir had been hiding his true abilities as a sword expert and had already reached a high level of expertise. His body had been strengthened by the river Styx, and all the weapons he possessed were working well against the injured Cerberus. With his refined swordsmanship, which he had developed through wars with the demon clans, he successfully landed some hits on the Cerberus. Vikir thought that he could do it, as an injured Cerberus was doable. Vikir's attack on the Cerberus seemed to be working, and he thought he had a chance of defeating the injured A+ rank monster. However, in a moment of carelessness, Vikir let his guard down, allowing the Cerberus to strike back with its claws. The first attack broke Vikir's sword, and the second sent him flying through the air. The force of the Cerberus's attack sent Vikir hurtling towards a tree trunk. With a sickening thud, he smashed into the tree trunk, and blood poured from his mouth. The impact had clearly caused a serious injury, and Vikir lay still, his body broken and unmoving. Vikir's eyes opened slowly and a surge of panic rushed through him as he remembered the direct attack of the Cerberus and felt a sharp pain in his left arm. He wondered if the beast had ripped his arm off in the attack, but when he looked down, he saw that it was still attached to his body, with some injuries. Vikir was relieved that the Cerberus was wounded and had not managed to sever his arm completely. He thought about the river Styx and how its magical properties might have played a role in protecting him from the beast's full force. He felt grateful for its protection but knew he couldn't rely on it completely. His relief was short-lived, however, as he quickly realized that the damage was still significant. He knew he wouldn't be able to take another hit from the Cerberus, and so he dodged as the beast attacked him once again. As an experienced hunter, he knew that he had to find the best way out of situations like this. The best possible decision right now was to run, with his tail tucked between his legs. As he ran, Vikir's mind raced with thoughts of survival. He knew that he had to find a way out of this situation, and fast. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. That's when he saw it, an iron fence just a few yards away. Vikir's heart leaped with hope. He knew that if he could get past that fence, he would be out of the restricted area and closer to safety. He pushed himself harder, running with all his might. With a burst of adrenaline, Vikir pushed himself through the gate, his heart pounding with relief. He had made it out of the restricted area, but he knew that he was not out of danger yet. He had to reach that place, the safe haven he had prepared for himself before embarking on this dangerous mission. As he ran, he searched for something in the woods nearby, his heart racing with the fear of being caught by the Hellhound. Finally, he spotted what he was looking for, a pit he had prepared beforehand. He jumped forward, narrowly avoiding Cerberus's jaws, and the Hellhound fell into the pit full of wooden spears. Vikir couldn't help but smile to himself, knowing that he had prepared well for this battle. He had smeared the wooden spears with the bloody bean essence that acted as poison for the cannid monsters. Cerberus growled and foam started oozing from its mouth, but Vikir remained focused and prepared for the next phase of the battle. He knew that Cerberus was a high-ranking demon and that this fight would be one of the toughest of his life. Vikir prepared a wooden spear and he threw it at Cerberus, hitting the Hellhound's side. But the Cerberus was still alive and walking towards him, ready to attack. Vikir counted the Hellhound's steps as it approached him, one by one. As soon as Cerberus took the 7th step, it stopped abruptly, falling to the ground right in front of Vikir. Vikir let out a sigh of relief, realizing that the rumors were true. The wooden spear he had just thrown was not like the others. It was a spear laced with the venomous fang of the deadly bloody mamba snake that prevented its victim from walking more than 7 steps once they were bitten. Vikir had hidden it away when he was younger, knowing that it could come in handy one day. The energy emanating from Cerberus' body entered Vikir as he stood over the 3 lifeless heads of the beast. He marveled at the power he now possessed, but his mind quickly turned to the concern of how he was going to transport the massive body back. He knew that the cause of the Cerberus's death would be obvious to anyone who saw it, and he began to consider who might be his witness. Perhaps the guardian knight who had seen him carving the wooden spears could be of help. But then, Vikir's thoughts turned to something else entirely. The Cerberus was a gatekeeper, which meant that it was guarding something. A dungeon, most likely, that could be nearby. Vikir's heart quickened at the thought of the treasure that might be hidden within. He knew that dungeons were often the lairs of powerful monsters. Vikir was determined to explore the dungeon, but before going there he took a handful of Cerberus feces and applied it to his body. Vikir knew that by doing this, he could avoid any small monsters that might be lurking in his path. Vikir's keen senses were on full display as he tracked the steps of the Cerberus through the forest. He noted the dried soil, the rotten leaves, and the moist roots, following the trail with a single-minded focus. As he backtracked the path, his eyes widened in recognition. This was the dungeon that the Cerberus had been guarding, and Vikir realized that he had been here before. He knew that this dungeon would be discovered in another 10 years, but he was certain that it would be completely empty by then. Right now, however, he could feel the mana beneath the rotten surface. Vikir cautiously approached the dungeon. He looked around, but he didn't see any light, and he realized that the dungeon must be deeper than he initially thought. But Vikir was undaunted. His crimson eyes glowed with excitement as he stepped inside the dungeon. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of treasures were waiting for him inside. As Vikir made his way through the dark dungeon, he saw ruby minerals that were scattered throughout the area. He was certain that these veins must be connected to the nearby Red All Mountain. Suddenly, he saw a glimmer of light shining from within the dungeon, and he couldn't help but wonder if it was the entrance he had been searching for. Eager to explore further, he quickened his pace and soon found himself standing in a brightly lit room. As his eyes adjusted to the light, he was struck by the sight of a massive ruby placed on a pillar in the center of the room. He couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the gem, and he realized that it must be infused with mana to produce such a bright glow. However, his moment of awe was interrupted when he spotted a nearby skeleton lying on the ground. As he approached, he noticed signs of violence, including deep stab wounds and dried brown bloodstains. He realized that someone had been here before him, and it had been quite some time since their untimely demise. Curious, Vikir picked up a letter that was lying next to the skeletal remains. The writer of letter began by introducing himself as Cain and explaining that he didn't want to dirty the pure white paper with his name. As Vikir read on, he realized that the handwriting was that of a Baskerville, and he wondered if the writer was a member of that Baskerville family. The letter went on to describe how Cain and his brother Abel had stumbled upon the legendary stone chamber that had been talked about within the family for generations. The two brothers had managed to navigate countless trials and kill many monsters in their quest to reach the chamber. However, the final assignment they found within had tied them there for 3 long years. Vikir couldn't believe the sacrifice they made for the treasure within the dungeon. He wondered what kind of treasure could possibly be worth such a sacrifice. His attention was drawn back to the present as he gazed upon the magnificent ruby at the center of the chamber, realizing that it must be the key to unlocking the final assignment of the dungeon. Vikir read the puzzle on the monument out loud. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. He couldn't make sense of it, but he remembered reading in the letter that Cain and Abel had also struggled with it. According to the letter, the two brothers had contemplated over the ominous text for a long time before coming to a conclusion. Cain had written that he and Abel were twins who were separated at birth. In order to obtain the treasure of the dungeon, they needed to become one again. That meant only one of them could leave with the treasure. Cain had ended up killing his own brother in a fierce battle, but despite that, there was no change. They had definitely gone from 2 to 1, but Cain couldn't take the treasure. After moments of regret, Cain had decided to leave the place and warn others not to come. He had written in the letter that there was nothing to obtain from this devil's den that only serves to taunt humans. Vikir read the letter carefully as Cain recounted their journey to the dungeon. They had faced countless challenges to get there, but now they were left with nothing. Vikir couldn't help but think about the assignment he had been given, and the fact that it was the same as Cain and Abel's despite the fact that he didn't have a twin. He knew that Cain and Abel had misinterpreted the text, but what did it mean? When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. The words echoed in his mind as he tried to decipher their meaning. Vikir refused to give up. He knew that there was no dungeon that could not be beaten, and he was determined to solve this puzzle. Vikir examined the skeleton carefully and suddenly had a realization. He thought about Cain and Abel's failure and understood that their downfall was their fixed mindset as 2 individuals. As he walked towards the ruby in the middle of the room, he analyzed the dark passageway leading to a bright stone chamber and realized that the answer to the dungeon was in the riddle. I am 1 when entering through the dark passageway, but as soon as the ruby's light casts a shadow on me, I become 2. And when darkness re-enters is when the stone chamber's final stage will open. As he broke the ruby, Vikir revealed that the answer was shadow. As Vikir broke the ruby, a sudden flash of light illuminated the room, revealing the treasure that had been hidden in the dungeon. Vikir's eyes widened in amazement as he realized what lay before him was the cause of the two brothers' deaths. Standing in front of him was a sword that emitted an evil aura, placed upon a stone. Vikir was shocked at the sight of the sword and wondered if it was the relic of the Devil's Den. As he examined the sword, his eyes fell upon the text inscribed on the stone beneath it. It stated that only those with Baskerville's blood would be able to take Beelzebub. He was surprised and shocked to learn that the sword Beelzebub originated from this very place. At the mention of sword Beelzebub, his mind raced with memories of a childhood long gone. He recalled a picture book he had seen as a child, which depicted the gluttonous fly Beelzebub, an unprecedented great monster that had invaded the continent in old legends. He remembered that Beelzebub was part of the Devil's holy constellation, also known as the 7 Calamities.
That's it, guys. We will meet in next part. Until then, make sure to subscribe and like the video.